Hey everyone. Before starting the video today, I just wanted to talk to you off script a little bit and talk about the channel itself. Firstly, sorry that this video is so late. I've been having some real issues with my internet, and it's put me way behind schedule. I'm going to try to pick back up that weekly schedule, and I'll also be trying to do a short theory video coming Thursday, hopefully. With that out of the way, I also have some good news. Between the Generation 2 video and now, we've hit 30 subscribers and over 500 views. I just want to say thank you. When I started making these videos, I didn't think anyone would really take any kind of interest in them. So it's been really nice to see people engaging with them. And just if you're somebody who has taken the time to watch my stuff and given it a like, or if you're subscribed, or if you're that one guy who followed my Twitter, thank you. And I hope you guys will stick around and keep watching. I'm still pretty new at this whole thing. When I started, I was literally, no experience at all with video editing. Only a little bit of experience with recording myself. And I'm kind of learning as I go. So, maybe things are just going to go up from here. Hopefully. Anyway, thank you all again. Let's do the video things. Welcome back to my series on the lore and real-world inspirations of Mabinogi. Generation 3 is essentially a direct continuation of the story of Generation 2, but I saved some of the more interesting parts of the real-world section to spice up this video. As always, you may want to consider enabling subtitles. I'll try to have them ready this time. I know they weren't up at first in last week's video. Without further ado, let's wrap up the first chapter. Generation 3 once again starts with Morrigan appearing in a vision to warn the Milesian that the seals separating Eren and the other world had begun to break apart. She bids the player to hurry and pass the warning to Toralok as the vision fades. Toralok realizes the seal must actually be the statues of Morrigan found in every dungeon of Lugh, and sends the player back to Barry Dungeon, and, by extension, to the other world of Generation 1. This time, we find ourselves in a mirror of Bangor. As before, this version is a ghost town, and the only person the Milesian finds is Mork, a skittish kobold. Mork is shocked to see a human, and then goes into a panic, warning the player that the goddess of destruction, Maka, is soon to return. Meanwhile, Morgant grants Rory the Pragarah, a sword used in the Battle of Moitura by none other than Lugh himself. Connecting the dots, Rory realizes that Morgant and Lugh are the same person, but Morgant is not pleased and tells Rory to never use the name again. Finally, Cycle anoints Rory as leader of the Darha Fawin, or the Army of Darkness. Meanwhile, the Milesian asks the people of Avon Maka about the goddess Maka herself, recording any information they can find and returning it to Toralok. The player is now forced to clear every dungeon on the face of Lugh, which is definitely important and not filler to stretch a very short quest chain as much as possible. Once all the dungeons are done, the Milesian encounters Rory, who beats them up again and nanks at them very, very hard. Cycle appears and prepares to kill the Milesian, but Price shows up and whisks the player away. Rory tries to chase the two down, but Cycle stops him, telling him not to allow petty revenge to interfere with the plan to destroy Eren. Once Cycle leaves, Rory asks Morgant if he really wants Eren totally destroyed, to which the Dark Lord reassures him that they are using Cycle to another end. The Milesian thanks Price for the rescue, and goes and speaks to Awen. Awen expresses some concern over the player's well-being, and is opposed to their continued involvement with the Dark Knights. The Milesian returns to Torlock once more and receives a book with insights onto how Milesians differ from the Tuatha Dé. The player also breaks the news that Rory is still alive, and has fallen to become a Dark Knight. Distraught, Torlock inquires about Mary, and learns about her reincarnation as Now. The Milesian takes a short side trip to help Torlock see her once again, which he thanks them for deeply. The player speaks to a priest, James, in Maka, who informs him that he believes that Maka may have already been reborn. He recollects Ezra's having Trina abducted and the Fomor invasion that followed, reasoning that the child must be Maka's medium if the Fomor are so desperate to keep her in their reach. The Milesian searches for more information and is led to Duncan, who explains that the goddess can be resurrected using a host body in the Leofowl. The hunt for the Leofowl leads back to the Otherworld, and into the depths of Bale Dungeon. Upon entering, the player sees a vision of Rory and Trina discussing her fate as Maka's medium, with Rory upset and asking if she had known all along. Trina tells her she did know, and gives him some reassurance that she's accepted it as her destiny. The two part, and Trina thinks about how much she wishes she could be Rory's child bride. The player uses a special robe to pass through Boyle Dungeon unseen, and finds Morgaunt guarding the Leofowl. He spots the Milesian and attempts to capture them, but Cristal takes them back to safety. The player tells her that Morgaunt had mentioned the name Cromm and is sent to speak with Shymus at the Dragon Ruins. Shymus tells the player that Cromm was an ancient dragon that would sometimes appear and wreak destruction, destroying everything in sight. The statue was built by people who had began to worship the dragon. Shymus notes that the dragon cultists had a method for summoning the dragon, using contracts and sacrifices, though he doesn't know any finer details. Morrigan appears to us in a vision once again, telling the Milesian that she's been sealed, again, and warns the player that if Maka resurrects, there is nothing she can do to stop the ensuing destruction, pleading for the player to do everything they can to stop her from being reborn. The Milesian tells Torlock about this, and begins a frontal assault on Boyle Dungeon. In the deepest chamber of the dungeon, the Milesian faces Morgaunt and Rory once again. The Milesian fends the two off, until Torlock and Now arrive, much to the shock of Rory, who is somehow able to see Now despite previously established lore about the Tuatha being unable to see her. The three lost heroes reunited. Torlock and Now try to reason with Rory, but he's as stubborn as ever. Finally, Cycle appears and tries to convince Rory to turn on his friends, pointing the blame at them for Rian's death. Torlock correctly points out that Ezra's was the one who harmed Rian, and points out that Cycle is essentially doing the same thing to Trina. Cycle rolls a natural 1 on a charisma check, and says something obviously villainous, causing Rory to turn on him. Rory destroys the Leofowl, and even manages to strike Cycle himself. Enraged, the Fomor King attacks Torlock and Rory. Torlock manages to tank one of his spells, but he's clearly the worse for wear. Finally, Morrigan arrives and urges the heroes to flee. They don't listen, and Rory ends up being critically injured by Cycle. Morrigan and the Fomor King bicker until Cycle reveals that Morrigan has been keeping a secret from the player and the three heroes. Aaron is Tir na Nog itself. A little more bickering, and Morrigan threatens to seal Cycle, confident that his plan has failed since Maka didn't resurrect, and therefore can't summon Cromm. Cycle pulls his trump card, revealing that Rory was used by his father to make a pact with the dragon. The dragon comes once the contract is invoked, and Morrigan takes Torlock and Now to safety, ditching the player with the greatest threat they've faced yet. The dragon is a powerful foe, and the terrain disfavors the Milesian, giving no cover from the dragon's fire. Despite this, the player manages to fight the dragon to a standstill. Cromm decides to speak to the Milesian, saying that he's taken an interest in them. He takes Rory, and leaves the Milesian with a warning. Tir na Nog will not be a paradise if the people living in it are unworthy, and to be cautious of the greed innate to human nature. With this, he leaves, and Generation 3 comes to a close. That was a decently eventful story, and luckily there's also quite a bit for us to unpack. Today, we get to talk about Lugh, Cromm, the Pragarah, and the Dark Knights. Let's get one of these out of the way right away. The Dark Knight. In the prehistoric age of July 1980, the 39th issue of Dragon magazine introduced the Anti-Paladin to the world of Dungeons and Dragons. The class was described as the evil opposite of the original Paladin class. An embodiment of all the worst parts of human nature. This is pretty obviously mimicked by Mabinogi's Dark Knights, as Rory and Lugh are both obsessed with and consumed by the darker side of human nature. Notably, a human Milesian can become a Dark Knight as well, and this transformation is noted to be powered by greed. That was fairly easy. Now what about our scaly buddy, Cromm? The mythical inspiration for Cromm is a god of the same name. As always with pre-Christian Celtic belief, much of it has been lost, but it is believed that this god was given sacrifices in hopes of good harvests. According to some, these sacrifices were firstborn children. Cromm was reimagined into a demon after the Christianization of Ireland. You may note that both of these ideas find their way into our dragon pal. Cromm's name translates into something along the lines of crooked mound. Notably, the mound mentioned here usually refers to gathered goods, but can also indicate piled corpses, which may be why the dragon in Mabinogi is initially introduced as a dragon of destruction or a dragon of death. So, now that we've got dungeons and dragons and other dragons out of the way, let's talk about Lugh. In the game, Lugh is a paladin and possibly a fellow Milesian, as mentioned in a book written by Torlog, though this point is up for debate. The game's Lugh fought in the Second Battle of Moyturat and is known as a hero. However, by the time of Generation 1, he has fallen from the path of grace and become a Dark Knight. He shows up several times in later generations, so we may discuss his role again, but let's talk about the Lugh of real-world myth. Lugh is one of the single most important members of the Tuatha De Danann. Lugh himself was either a quarter or half Fomorian. There's a lot of confusion here because his mother's parentage is kind of a question mark, and sometimes she's even a man. Lugh was often depicted as a talented warrior, and the Tuatha De King after the death of Nua. Modernly, he's been interpreted as a sun god, as he is sometimes compared to the sun. However, he was more likely a god of oaths and promises. He's generally described as blonde or red-haired, and has a bunch of cool magical toys. Slingshots, spears, swords. Honestly, part of me wouldn't be surprised if Link from The Legend of Zelda draws some inspiration from him. He was prophesied to one day kill his grandfather, an event which happened in the last battle of Moyturat in both the myth and the game. There's a lot we could talk about, way more than I could ever fit in one video, so let's talk about his sword instead. The Pragarah draws its name from the mythical Lugh's sword, Fragarach. In-game, the sword is one Lugh uses to slay Balor, and is later given to Rory, giving him a considerable power boost of some sort. The mythical Fragarach originally belonged to Nua, and only falls into Lugh's possession after Nua loses his arm. Though he possesses the weapon during the last battle of Moyturat, it's unclear if he used it in his fight with Balor, as he was more of a spear and sling kind of guy. The sword has a few cool nicknames of its own, the Whisperer, or the Answerer, among others. The sword was said to respond to the roar of the Leofowl with a whisper, hence the name. The sword is attributed a few other powers as well, such as making those threatened with it unable to lie, which kinda just seems like a sword thing, controlling the wind, or piercing any wall or shield and making unhealable wounds. Notably, the player obtains the Pragarah in Generation 25 as a technique which lowers magical resistance in enemies. Why it's spelled Pragarh instead of with an F is a mystery, but if I had to guess, it's probably translation weirdness between Irish, Korean, and English. That's pretty much it. As always, thank you for watching to the end. If you're still here, consider liking and maybe even subscribing if you'd like to keep up with my videos. I try to post weekly, and I hope to see you guys next time.